Hey everybody, this is Alex Dickson of Studio 722. Today I'm coming at you with a little bit of a tutorial, sort of a basic rundown of Cubase. I'm running version 8.5, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I see a lot of YouTubers, especially YouTubers that primarily work with FL Studio, then they try Cubase and they seem to struggle with it a little bit. So I kind of want to give you a little bit of a quick and dirty rundown and, go over a little bit of the different parts of Cubase and how to navigate it a little easier. And, let's just go from here. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is channel presets. Okay, not necessarily channel presets, but instrument presets. Okay, well, not presets. First, let's talk about how to add a track. You can come over here to your track list, and then you can right click and click add audio track, instrument track, or any other these other kind of tracks. In Cubase 10, which is the current version, I only have 8.5. In Cubase 10, you also have another type of track called a sampler track. And that sort of works a little bit along the lines of how FL Studio works, I'm guessing, but it seems like an interesting protocol to work with. Not protocol, interesting type of track to work with. But anyway, why don't we go from left to right on the screen? Okay, over here you have your inspector panel. You have all sorts of various options. Depending on what kind of track you have your main inspector, which gives the instrument name or sound file name, and you have some basic functions like mute, solo, read, write automation. You have open device panel, which can also give you some options for a couple other settings. Auto fader settings, I'm not sure what that does. I don't use it, but you have record enable, monitor. You have musical mode, which is something I might dive into a little bit in another episode. I don't know. I'm just giving a quick and dirty rundown. You've got lock, which prevents any editing. You have show lanes, which can show various lanes of different parts of a recording, like if you're doing loop recording and you just keep playing the same part over and over, it'll do lanes so you can do comping and stuff like that. Anyway, in your inspector panel you also have fader volume, you have panning, and you have track delay in milliseconds, so you can sort of offset how it functions a little bit. And down here you have track presets, and you have all these different options to sort of narrow down what you're wanting to do with the track. And like, let's just say I wanted to go to keyboard, pop, it gives me gentle roads, because that's the only one in the list. We can go to guitar for if we're recording a guitar track. You can do acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and you have all these sub options of categories you can choose. And as you can see, there's a whole list of various track presets and all that. And right here you have your inputs. You have your inputs to the channel and you have your outputs to the channel. You also have track versions, which is sort of a thing similar to the lanes, but the difference being is, or you can compare it to Pro Tools playlists. You have track versions in Cubase, which allow you to do different versions of a given track. Its name is track versions. Like you record it once and, you want to save that particular recording, and you want to try it again a different way, you can use track versions to enable you to keep your previous recording without overwriting it as a separate track type. And you have like new version, duplicate version names. We also have chord track, which is something that's relatively new to Cubase as of like version 7 or 7.5. You have your inserts over here in the inspector panel. You can in Cubase 8.5 you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 8 inserts, and you can load your various plugins. You have your channel strip, which is something I'll dive into here in a few minutes. You have an equalizer section. You have sends, which you can send to an effects bus or any other bus you have. You have direct routing. Yeah, you have direct routing, which you can actually change where it goes. You also have your fader. You have notepad where you can take notes. You also have quick controls, which you can use to take your MIDI controller and actually make the MIDI controller learn a particular element of a plugin, and you can automate that parameter or use your MIDI controller to control that parameter, based on the knob or fader you assign to it. Anyway, that's the inspector panel. Next to it, you have the track list, and then next to it, you have your work area. As you can see, I got a few different track types. I have instrument tracks, I have audio tracks, I also have a group track, and there's all sorts of different track types you can add. You can also add effects track, add group tracks, VCA faders. You also have arranger track, chord track, and each one of these does something different. Now, let's say you want to organize your session a little bit, make it look neater. One thing you can do is, first let me unshow these. Like, I'm going to take these synths, and I'm going to click on one, and then I'm going to hold shift and click on the next one that I want to go as far as down as I want to select. Now, what I can do is I can throw these in a folder. So you right click and move selected tracks to a folder track. Now what that does is allows you to open and close the folder to make your project a little neater. And let's say you have 100 tracks in your session, and you could use the folder track to kind of group things together. Now, that doesn't add a group track. The folder track is just for organization purposes. Now, let's go to the mixer. The mixer, you can hit F3, or you can go to devices, mix console. As you can see, I got multiple tracks, ins and outs. And over here, going from left to right, is your visibility, which means you can toggle various channels in and out to also organize your mixer. Like, let's say I don't want to see my stereo in, which is my only input in this session, even though I have a multi-channel interface because I haven't set that up for this particular session. So, also I have my workspace a little bit customized. So what you can do, if you go over here to this button over here, you can select a few different various things. Like, I like to have the channel overview of all my various tracks. You can have a meter bridge. You can have an equalizer section. You can have channel racks, which is your entire input, EQ, channel strip, and send section. You can even have track pictures, like you assign a picture to it to make it easier to identify. And you also have a notepad, which I explained in the inspector earlier. You also have your channel selector you can hide and add. You also have your control room mixer. Now, this area, the center section, is where you'll be doing most of your work. The center section has, from left to right, your track listing with your faders And top to bottom, you have your routing, inserts, EQ, channel strip, which is a pretty interesting little feature. The channel strip is pretty unique to Cubase because it's pretty much like having your own mixing console. Just like a mixing console, and you have your options of using inserts as well. And the simplicity of loading plugins, like I'll just bring one up. These are my effects plugins. And as you can see, it groups most of them, but the ones that don't have a defined group will be at the bottom. And you can come up here to the right on the plugin list, and like, let's say I want to type waves, and I get various plugins with the word wave in it, or I can type distortion and it'll bring up the distortion category as well as any other category that distortion plugins would be in. Anyway, now your send section is exactly that. So, like, let's just say, for instance, I want to add an effects track to, let's just say, my snare. I'll go over, select it with left click, then I'll right click and I'll click add effects channel to snare. And I can come over here and select my effects, and let's just say I want to add a delay. We can name it. You can choose your configuration, stereo, mono, or whatever your setup is. You can have output routing, like you can output it to a different channel. You can output it to your stereo out, which is your monitors, etc. You can then pretty much put it anywhere you want it to go, and you can also have it create inside a folder or outside the folder. Now, let's just say I want this delay plugin, the Isotope DDLY. It's one of my favorite delay plugins anyway. But anyway, I'll minimize that because we're not talking about the plugin itself. Anyway, we come over here to the snare, and as you can see on the send, you have a level, and that tells how much of the given being sent over to the send channel. You also have the option to disable it in pre and post fader, and you can click there, and you can also remove it or change to a different send, what have you. And also, you can resize your tracks on your mixer. You can hit H on your keyboard to make it bigger, G on your keyboard to make it smaller. And now let's go over here to the control room mixer. You have your control room, which gives channels where, like, if you have a surround sound setup, you have down mix presets, which can help you when you're rendering a file or whatever. You have monitors, which if you have maybe a multi-monitor setup and you have like a monitor controller that hooks up by USB or something, you can add all that to your setup, and you can add all that to your setup, and you can and you can change between different monitors via software. Down here you have your main monitor mix, you have a dim switch, you have reference level, you have your metronome if you want that to be able to play through your studio settings. I'll go into that here in a little bit. But you have various things, and then you have your meter section, which you can do loudness. You can also change what you want your rating to be as far as what where you want these to turn red or not. You can also come over here to master, and you can also change your scale on the meter, for your overall output meter. Anyway, getting out of the mixer. In the work area, you also can do G and H to resize your zoom level on your work area as well. You also have all your various tools up here, but you can also right click and hold and go over to whatever tool you want. You can mute, unmute, you can do a range selection, you can do scissors, chop up, whatever you want. And of course, Control Z is undo. You know, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And to get access to various editors, all you have to do is double click on an event. Again, you can do G and H to do your zoom level. Right now I'm in the drum editor, and how you can get to the drum editor with a MIDI track on a drum instrument. Let's say, you know, like I have Groove Agent 1 here, or Groove Agent SE. I can come down here to the drum map and I can do drum map setup, or I can create a drum map from instrument. Now the drum map from instrument is sort of plugin specific, you know. The plugin has to be able to accept that option. And then you have your MIDI tracks, you know, which has all the MIDI data. You can do MIDI expressions, you can do note expressions, you can do chord editing, quantize, transport. You can also do length like legato and all that stuff. You have your snaps up top, your grid. Some of the common controls you'll use are F2 to bring up your transport panel, F3 to bring up your mixer and make it go away. You can take two audio events and hit X to crossfade. You can Control D to duplicate. You can do any number of things. You can also set your own key commands and all that. All you have to do is come up to File, Key Command, and you can set your own key commands, and you can also search for the command you want. Like I have silence as silence. I have, yes, as Alt-Shift-S. That is my personal key command, and for the audio editor. And I also have the gain command, which is set to Alt-Shift-D. You know, that's my own personal command that I have set up. But there's anything, you can set up any number of commands you want. You can set it up however you want. You can pretty much make Cubase work out exactly the way you want it. Okay, now let's talk about inputs and outputs real quick. First, for inputs and outputs, first you got to come up here and choose you come up here to devices, device setup. You come down here to VST audio system, and you click up here to choose, let's say, your ASIO driver or sound card driver that you're using. And down here you can name inputs and outputs for your sound card. And you have also some various editing functions to help you with editing. And now to set your inputs and outputs, you have your VST connection panel. You have your input, you can do add bus, you can do stereo mono or all that. And like, let's just say I want a stereo bus and a mono bus. Now you can add any number of each, you know, up to, I think it's 128 ins, 128 outs, something like that. But of course that's referencing mono channels or something. But, and over here you can select your actual input, and you can also come over here and also do the same thing, add a bus for outputs, and select your output. You can also do groups and effects, like say, like your software effects. Like if you make a group channel, it'll show up here. If you make an effects channel, it'll show up here. You have external effects, which you can, like EQs and compressors, hardware that you can plug into your system and actually get it all synced and clocked to where it'll be the timing right, and you can actually use it as an external effect, that you can use live during a session. You can also use external instruments, like via MIDI. You can do any number of things. You also have your studio, which this sort of links to the control room mixer I showed you earlier. I have my monitors set up as monitor 1 left and right, monitor left and right, and you can create a couple other different not track types, but types for studio ins and outs. Now we go into finding plugins. You come up here to devices and you have plugin information and a couple other things, but that's not where you go find the plugins. You go over here to plugin manager. Let me move that out of the way. And down here is where you set your plugin path. You click the plus and you go find your VST folder. Like if you have a third VST folder on a separate hard drive, you can also delete path. You can also reset and rescan all. And you have VST effects and VST instruments, and it has all your categories. Now, one thing that my computers have always had trouble with is scanning the plugins through the plugin manager. I think that has to do with one or two of the plugins in my folders. I don't know which one, but what I have to do is I have to set my plugin path and close the program and go back into it and let Cubase scan all the plugins at startup. Now, it'll only do that once unless you add another plugin to your folders. So, anyway, now let's go into like instrument presets. You can come down to access the virtual instrument. First, you gotta have your track selected, and you can click this little piano icon and it's called Edit Instrument. Now, this is Groove Agent SE. You can come over here to the preset panel and you can choose your various genres, categories, and all that. You can also read and write automation, and that's pretty much in just about every channel type. And a lot of the plugins have various other options you can do. You also have a synthesizer, same thing. You got your presets panel. You can also create your own. And there's a number of things that you can do that I'm not going to cover here. But overall, that is a quick and dirty rundown of Cubase. All right. Hopefully this helps. God bless. Bye.